The desert wind rolled across the barren flats like a lonely sigh, carrying dust, heat, and the echoes of 100 forgotten footsteps. Near sundown, the sky burned orange, fading into violet, where the mountains carved their outlines against the darkening heavens. Coyotes had begun their distant calls, and the world felt suspended in that strange stillness only the frontier understood. Cowboy Luke Harwood rode through that silence, boots worn, hat low, and heart heavier than he ever let on. He'd spent the whole day rounding stray cattle and fixing busted fences, and he longed only for coffee, rest, and maybe a song from the old phonograph he kept in his cabin. But fate doesn't check a man's plans. Fate comes when it wants, and fate came in the form of a faint, trembling, impossible sound. A tiny voice, so small he nearly mistook it for the whine of the wind carried across the dry wash beneath him. "Mama." Luke froze. His horse, Titan, pricked his ears forward, snorting as if he, too, sensed something living where life shouldn't be. Luke turned in the saddle, scanning the cracked earth. "Hello?" he called, expecting no answer. "Mama." The voice was higher this time, weak, almost a whimper. Luke kicked his boot gently, urging Titan down the slope. His pulse quickened. What could make that sound way out here? No homesteads for miles. No travelers passed this way lately. And no child should be anywhere near this barren, unforgiving stretch of land. The sound came again, guiding him toward a clump of mesquite shrubs, half buried in sand. Something was moving barely. A burlap sack. Luke jumped from his horse before Titan had even stopped. He knelt beside the sack, his breath catching in his throat. It trembled. Something inside shifted weakly. He pulled out his knife and sliced the rope, knotting it shut. When he peeled the rough fabric open, the world seemed to stop. A baby. A tiny, trembling baby with dust caked on his cheeks, lips cracked, face flushed from heat and crying. The child couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 months old. Its small hands clawed weakly at the air, and as Luke leaned close, the baby reached toward him. "Mama," it whimpered again, voice so fragile it nearly broke him. Luke felt something hot flare in his chest, hunger first, then sorrow, then a fierce protectiveness he hadn't felt in years. Who would do this?" he whispered, lifting the little one into his arms. The baby was burning with fever, clothes damp with sweat, and too light, far too light, like hunger had already begun its cruel work. Luke looked around the empty desert, jaw tightening. "Whoever you are," he muttered to the unseen cowards who abandoned a helpless child, "you're monsters." Key wrapped the child in his duster, shielding it from the evening chill now creeping in, and mounted Titan. "Hang on, little one," he murmured. "Ain't no one dying out here today. Not if I've got breath in me." Titan galloped through the falling dusk, hooves striking the earth like thunder. Luke held the baby close, feeling its weak breaths against his chest. With every mile, the child grew more silent, and that terrified him more than any outlaw ever had. He kept talking anything to keep the baby awake. "You're safe now. I got you. You hear me? Stay with me. Don't you go." By the time the cabin lights came into view, the stars were sharp overhead, and the night wind had teeth. Luke burst through his door with the baby in his arms and went straight to the hearth. He set water to boil, grabbed blankets, and lit every lamp in the cabin until the room glowed warm and gold. The baby's eyes fluttered, half open. Luke dipped a cloth in cool water and gently touched its forehead. "Easy now. You're burning up, but we'll fix that," as he nursed the child with careful sips of water and soothing words. His mind raced. He needed help, real medical help, and the only one nearby with that kind of knowledge was Clara Jameson, the widow who ran the small clinic in town. She had a reputation for stubborn courage and a heart big enough to take in strays, injured animals, and exhausted cowboys alike. Luke wrapped the child securely and mounted Titan again, riding fast toward town. Lamps still burned in Clara's clinic when he arrived, breathless and urgent. She opened the door in her apron and spectacles, hair tied back, expression sharp with concern. "Luke, you look like you saw a rattler kissing a mountain lion. What happened?" He held out the child. "Found a baby, in a sack, out in the desert, abandoned." Clara's face drained of color. "Dear God, bring them in quick." She took the baby with skilled, gentle hands and went straight to work. Luke hovered by the door, heart pounding, until Clara finally looked at him with something like relief. "The fever's high, but treatable. Dehydration is worse." "But," she smiled softly, "they're a fighter." Luke felt his shoulders sag with relief. "So they're gonna make it?" "I believe so." Clara touched the baby's tiny hand. Whoever left them out there meant for them not to. Luke's jaw tightened again. "I'm gonna find out who did this." Clara studied him a moment. "Maybe, but tonight, this baby needs a name. Babies should have names spoken with love." Luke hesitated. He hadn't named anything in years. But then the child opened his eyes blue, startlingly blue, and reached his hand toward him again. Luke swallowed. "How about Hope?" Clara's gaze softened. "Hope Harwood." The baby, Hope, made a small sound, as if approving. Luke felt something shift deep inside him, something he hadn't felt since losing his wife years ago. A piece of his heart he thought was gone started to ache back to life. For the next 2 weeks, Luke barely left the clinic. He helped Clara with chores, fetched water, repaired broken steps outside her door, and kept Hope close whenever Clara allowed it. People in town whispered, most of them kind whispers, some suspicious, but Luke didn't care. The only thing that mattered was the tiny life he'd pulled from death's doorstep. Hope grew stronger, rounder, louder. She laughed for the first time on the 8th day, and Luke nearly cried listening to it. Clara teased him for pacing the floor every time Hope made a new sound, but secretly she found it sweet. And maybe something more. One evening, Clara and Luke rocked Hope between them as she drifted to sleep. Clara's voice was soft when she spoke. "Luke, what are you going to do when she's well?" He looked down at Hope, then at Clara. "I'm gonna raise her." Clara blinked in surprise. "You alone?" Luke smiled faintly. "I've been alone long enough, I think." "I think she was sent to fix that." Clara didn't argue. She just nodded, resting her hand lightly on his arm. A few days later, the sheriff arrived with news. They'd found wagon tracks near where Luke discovered the baby. Tracks leading toward an outlaw camp. The sheriff suspected the baby had been taken from a homestead raid, and instead of caring for her, the outlaws had left her to die to avoid the burden. Luke's blood ran hot, but he looked at Hope sleeping peacefully and whispered, "You ain't ever gonna hurt again. I promise." Over the next months, Luke built a crib, then a playpen, then a whole nursery room in his cabin. Clara visited often to check on Hope, but soon her visits became less about medical care and more about supper, laughter, and late evening conversations on the porch. Hope began saying her first words, "Mama" and "Da," and she always said, "Okay, Mama," looking at Clara. One evening, Luke watched them together, Clara holding Hope, Hope tugging her apron and giggling, and he felt something settle inside him, a sense of rightness he hadn't felt in years. He stepped close. "Clara." She looked up. "Yes." "Hope already thinks you're her mama." Clara smiled, cheeks warming. "I know." Luke took a breath. "How would you feel about making it true?" Her eyes widened, then softened, filling with emotion. "I'd feel like that's what life's been leading me toward." Luke's voice was low, steady. "Clara Jameson, marry me. Help me raise this little girl right." Clara's answer came as she leaned in and kissed him, Hope giggling between them. Their wedding was small, but filled with warmth. The townsfolk came bearing gifts, blankets, dresses, toys, carved horses, pies. Luke held Clara's hand as Hope babbled happily in her arms. And through it all, Luke kept thinking, a sack in the desert. Ha! A tiny voice calling Mama, and the miracle that had changed all of their lives. For years to come, whenever someone asked Hope where her story began, Luke would kneel beside her and say, "Your first word saved you, darling. And it saved me too," and Clara would add, "Sometimes families aren't born, they're found, eh?" And every time the desert wind blew across their ranch, Luke would remember the night destiny put a helpless baby in his arms and gave him a second chance at life, love, and the family he never thought he'd have again.